The two-faced deity Janus was perhaps the most mysterious of all the Roman gods. This ancient divine figure far predated the Greek additions to Rome's pantheon, and likely even the city itself. Though he lacked his own specialized priesthood, Janus would remain a central figure to Roman cult worship for as long as it remained pagan. For Janus was revered as the god of beginnings, transitions, and endings, with his two faces representing duality itself. It is no accident that the first month is still called January in his honor, in recognition of the transition from one year to the next. Still, despite his importance in Roman religion, the worship of Janus took place in a rather modest and obscure temple within the Roman Forum, one that paled in comparison to the grandeur of the holy abode of Jupiter Optimus Maximus. But this temple was unique, as during the Republic its doors were almost always open, for the Romans believed that this temple housed divine fury, discord, and wrath so potent that by opening the gates of the temple during wartime, these malevolent forces would be unleashed on Rome's enemies. It became tradition to leave the gates open during times of war and to close the temple when Rome was at peace. But true peace was a rare occurrence in the warlike Republic, and from the construction of the temple by the legendary King Numa until the inauguration of the imperial principate, the temple's doors were only closed twice. In over 700 years, Rome only enjoyed 2 brief respites from war. But in the true spirit of Janus, the reign of Augustus would precipitate a remarkable change in Rome's fortunes. The first princeps boasted that his greatest achievement as ruler was that during his reign, the doors of the temple would be closed 3 times, an intentional gesture meant to demonstrate that he had brought unprecedented peace and prosperity to Rome, in effect justifying his trampling of Roman political rights by pointing to the newfound security of the Roman state. Augustus claimed that he had launched Rome into a new era, one that would become known as the Pax Romana, and that this new world was only possible under his benevolent guidance. Dating schemes for the Pax Romana differ, but the most commonly accepted definition of this supposed Golden Age places it between Augustus's ascension in 27 BC to the death of Marcus Aurelius in 180. Proponents of the Pax Romana point to the empire's political stability, economic growth, and territorial expansion to justify calling this era a time during which the condition of the human race was most happy and prosperous, according to Edward Gibbon. But is this rosy conception of the first 200 years of the Roman Empire accurate? As always, it really depends on who you ask. To a Roman aristocrat, the loss of their ability to campaign for high political office seemed a meager concession to gain access to wealth and luxury that their forefathers could never have imagined. But to the vast majority of citizens, poor plebeians in Rome, and the rural subsistence farmers of Italy, it is doubtful that standards of living improved in any truly meaningful way. For no matter how grand the newly constructed villas of the rich were to become, life remained precariously balanced on a brutal knife's edge for the vast majority of Roman citizens. At the height of Roman decadence, many were still just one bad harvest away from starvation, and the specter of disease and sudden death that haunted many Romans remained ever present for the malnourished poor. Anyone holding up the Pax Romana as a golden age is betraying their own bias toward our aristocratic sources and tacitly admitting that the lives of the poor Romans, never mind the countless numbers of even more exploited slaves, mean little to their construction of history. As always, for this particular brand of historian, the sufferings and hardship of the masses count for nothing in the face of the propaganda narratives that affirm the supposed magnificence of Rome's great men. For this is exactly what the Pax Romana is in reality, an empty phrase intended to justify and reify the exploitative Roman social hierarchy, as well as Rome's unquestioned hegemony over the Mediterranean world. So while debating the economic impact of the Pax Romana is important, and a topic we will return to at length in a later video, it is secondary to our actual purposes here, debunking the idea that the Pax Romana actually existed at all. For starters, Rome was not at peace during the Pax Romana, something that even the most stalwart defenders of the idea will readily admit. Instead, modern proponents of the Pax Romana will call it an era of relative peace and stability, a startling admission that subjectivity has already started to creep in and that they are on shaky ground. The debate has now suddenly shifted from one of absolute good to relative good, hardly the hallmark of what is often held up as a world historical geopolitical accomplishment. Evidence marshaled in favor of the Pax Romana frequently includes maps of Rome at its territorial zenith, but I've always been puzzled by the claim that Roman battlefield success is proof of a peaceful era, for to even point to Rome's territorial expansion as evidence of peace is to admit that military campaigning continued essentially unabated throughout the Pax Romana. After all, how else would Rome achieve these new domains except by force? If you're enjoying this video, please do us a favor by liking, commenting, and subscribing. We're a small channel, and this is the only way to get the almighty YouTube algorithm to notice us. Furthermore, you can help Tribunate become more sustainable by becoming a member for as little as 99 cents a month. Thank you for all of your support. Caesar and Pompey both added vast swaths of land to Rome's domains immediately before the fall of the Republic, but for obvious reasons, the success of these generals in war is never regarded as evidence that Rome was in fact at peace. This glaring contradiction at the heart of the supposed Pax Romana is all too often simply ignored. But furthermore, it is not even accurate to claim that these wars were suddenly fought on a smaller scale, or that fewer non-combatants perished as a result. For example, the conquest of Britain resulted in hundreds of thousands of deaths across the decades of warfare that Rome required to gain a stable foothold on the island. In fact, it is in a history of Rome's invasion of Britain that the Roman writer Tacitus presents a searing indictment against the idea of the Pax Romana by recounting the supposed words of the Caledonian tribal chieftain Calgacus. "You have not tasted servitude. There is no land beyond us, and even the sea is no safe refuge when we are threatened by the Roman fleet. We are the last people on earth, and the last to be free. Our very remoteness in a land known only to rumor has protected us up till this day. Today, the furthest bounds of Britain lie open, and everything unknown is given an inflated worth. But now there is no people beyond us, nothing but tides and rocks and, more deadly than these, the Romans. It is no use trying to escape their arrogance by submission or good behavior. They have pillaged the world. When the land has nothing left for men who ravage everything, they scour the sea. If an enemy is rich, they are greedy. If he is poor, they crave glory. Neither east nor west can sate their appetite. They are the only people on earth to covet wealth and poverty with equal craving. They plunder, they butcher, they ravish, and call it by the lying name of empire. They make a desert and call it peace." Other wars in Dacia and Hispania would prove no less bloody than Rome's attempted conquest of Britain. It is frequently claimed by apologists for Rome that the Pax Romana benefited these conquered territories because by imposing peace from above, even at sword point, Rome ended armed conflict between local tribes. They insist that the body count from Rome's wars of aggression is dwarfed by the casualties that would have resulted from warfare and raiding within these societies. I take issue with this approach, however, because the counterfactual figures are always too conjectural to really evaluate with any sense of objectivity. Furthermore, by arbitrarily limiting the number of victims to those who perished during the principal invasion, these approaches conveniently eliminate the untold numbers of provincials who died at the hands of Roman magistrates seeking to maintain Roman domination, even when no open warfare was occurring. By far the most famous example of this is Jesus of Nazareth, who was crucified for perceived offenses towards the Roman-aligned regime, even though Judea was ostensibly free of armed conflict at the time. Who knows how many more faced similar gruesome fates across the empire, simply for running afoul of Roman administrators, tax collectors, and magistrates. The brutal and heartless Roman administration of the provinces brings home the lie of the Pax Romana, that despite claims of prosperity and peace, these fruits of empire were something really only intended for Romans. Provincials were spurred by abuses and exploitation into revolts, like the one organized by the Celtic Queen Boudica in 60, or the 3 separate Jewish revolts in Palestine in 66, 115, and 132. The Jewish revolts alone easily rank as some of the most bloody wars throughout the entire Roman period, with estimates of over 1 million dead and the absolute devastation of Jerusalem, which would affect the entire region for centuries. One wonders why the idea of the Pax Romana is never invalidated by these Roman provincial atrocities. Further damaging to the idea of the Pax Romana as a golden age of peace is that though the Roman military remained fully active, it suddenly found much less success than in previous generations. Attempts to spread Roman dominion into Scotland, Arabia, and sub-Saharan Africa met with failure, while Rome and Parthia continued to trade blows for decades, with neither side able to deliver a knockout punch. But the greatest setbacks would occur in Germania, as the brutally efficient Roman war machine ground to a halt in the deep forests across the Rhine, and was dealt its most significant defeat since Hannibal in the Teutoburg Forest. Efforts to annex Germania devolved into a bloody quagmire that sucked up Roman resources and manpower throughout the Pax Romana, with German armies eventually even reaching Italy itself during the reign of Marcus Aurelius. So not only was Rome not at peace, it wasn't even particularly successful at fighting the myriad wars that occurred during the Pax Romana. But even if we narrow the scope of warfare further and discount these bloody conflicts, the Pax Romana remains a lie, because Rome experienced a tragic civil war from 69 to 70, as various claimants sought the throne after the death of Nero and the downfall of the Julio-Claudian dynasty. Racked by wars, foreign and domestic, a poor plebeian could be forgiven for asking when the peace that supposedly accompanied the closing of the doors of Janus's temple was supposed to arrive. This question would be even more valid for an enslaved member of Boudica's Iceni tribe, a grieving Germanic widow, or a Jew driven into exile by the Roman legions. Were you to tell them that their suffering and loss was of no real concern because they actually lived in an era of peace and prosperity under the benevolent hand of Rome, they might believe you were making a sick joke. Tell them that the devastation was actually ultimately for their benefit, and you would probably be met with violence yourself. The idea then of the Pax Romana was created and amplified, not because it was true, but because it was politically useful. For not only did Augustus need to create a sense of legitimacy for his new order, he faced the nearly insurmountable challenge of justifying one-man rule in a Roman political context that detested the trappings of monarchy. So Augustus invited the Romans to trade liberty for security. Though this security didn't really exist, neither did real liberty in the Roman state for the vast majority of its residents, so it was a concession that they were willing to make. The Stoic philosopher Seneca, who was the first to use the term Pax Romana, even directly ties this concept of security to the benevolence of the divine emperor. He is the bond which fastens the commonwealth together. He is the breath of life to all those thousands who, by themselves, would become merely an encumbrance and a source of plunder if that directing mind were withdrawn. Bees have but one mind, till their king doth die. But when he dies, disorderly they fly. Such a misfortune will be the end of the peace of Rome. It will wreck the prosperity of this great people. The nation will be free from this danger as long as it knows how to endure the rains. Should it never break them or refuse to have them replaced if they were to fall off by accident, then this mighty whole, this complex fabric of government, will fly asunder into many fragments, and the last day of Rome's empire will be that upon which it forgets how to obey. For this reason, we need not wonder that princes, kings, and all other protectors of a state, whatever their titles may be, should be loved beyond the circle of their immediate relatives. For, since right-thinking men prefer the interests of the state to their own, it follows that he who bears the burden of state affairs must be dearer to them than their own friends. Indeed, the emperor, long ago identified himself so thoroughly with the state that neither of them could be separated without injury to both, because the one requires power, while the other requires a head. But in addition to this, Augustus positioned himself as the bringer of peace, chiefly to deny the existence of war. Never mind that armed conflicts occurred throughout his reign, and that he even openly acknowledged them. He instead demonstrated an Orwellian command of language by simply denying that true war, meaningful war, was actually occurring. This was essential to his political project because Augustus knew that the only person capable of usurping his position as princeps was a war hero with the command of loyal legions and popular backing. To prevent the minting of new war heroes, he downplayed the severity of ongoing conflicts and denied honors and recognition to successful generals outside the imperial family, such as the grandson of Crassus, to prevent them from building a public profile from which they could challenge his one-man rule. This tactic would be employed by future emperors to degrade the achievements of their commanders and thereby secure the throne from any potential rivals. Though delivered over 100 years after the death of Augustus, the Greek orator Aelius Aristides captured his preferred doublethink well in a pro-Roman speech meant to flatter the imperial court. People no longer believe in wars. Indeed, doubt whether they ever happened. Stories about them are usually regarded as myths. But if war should flare up somewhere on the frontiers, as is natural given an immeasurably great empire, given the folly of the Dacians, the difficult situation of the Libyans, or the miseries of the people by the Red Sea, who are incapable of enjoying the blessings of the present, these wars quickly disappear again, just like myths, as do the stories about them. So great is the peace that you now have. Wars that the regime did not wish to acknowledge were simply not wars. At least, not really. It's a tactic that is still in use by governments that hope to dodge accountability for military action. Why then, if there are so many reasons for discounting the Pax Romana, is the defense of this idea so important to so many even today? The simple answer is that the propaganda value of the Pax Romana to the maintenance of the imperial system and Rome's domination of subject peoples is equally valuable to those who similarly believe that peace can be achieved through military means and enforced from above via the unquestioned hegemony of a superpower. That's what makes the issue so touchy for so many today. For them, it isn't really about the efficacy of Roman state policy 2,000 years ago, but instead the appropriateness of modern, hegemonic international power structures and imperial adventurism. Simply look at some of the critical comments that are bound to appear below this video, and I'm sure you'll find it odd how many reactionaries are so dedicated to defending the honor of long-dead Roman emperors. This level of investment in defending the Pax Romana is of course informed more by modern ideology than historical fact, and those that are committed to upholding it will forever be cursed to attempt fitting round pegs into square holes, and wondering why things don't quite add up, as they refuse to question the assumptions that have led to the inherent contradictions and dissonance within their worldview. But in my opinion, the primary error that occurs when speaking about the Pax Romana isn't simply confusion over what constitutes a war. It is rather a faulty definition of peace. For the Latin word for peace, pax, provides the root of our English term pacify, and the two were functionally equivalent in the Roman world. To pacify through armed conflict and enforce this status at sword point without input from the conquered was peace in the Roman mind. This is why they could make a desert and call it peace. They sought to eliminate any disturbances to their domination, and how this was accomplished made no difference. Caesar, for example, utilized stunning brutality in his conquest of Gaul, murdering with abandon, maiming prisoners, subjecting civilians to starvation, and enslaving any he could capture, but at the same time showed remarkable clemency towards his Roman foes. To the Roman, there was no distinction here, so long as they were equally effective at bringing about the end of a conflict. Tactics were justified by their efficacy alone. It is easy to understand, then, why a Roman could imagine a state of near constant warfare, or at least the threat of armed conflict, as an era of peace. For, if the result of these conflicts was beneficial to Rome, and if new subjects were pacified, then peace had truly been achieved. The anguish of the provincials, of the enslaved, meant little. They were outside the Roman community, and counted for nothing in this calculus. Conversely, we adhere to a radically different notion of peace today, one that is perhaps best exemplified by Martin Luther King Jr.'s statement. True peace is not merely the absence of tension. It is the presence of justice. This is a recipe for a lasting peace, one that we have not yet achieved, but one that it should be the mission of all humanity to build towards, a peace based on universal brotherhood and the domination of none. To achieve their peace, the Romans made deserts. To reach ours, we must cultivate gardens.